The flags were still. The room was cold but elegant, just like you'd expect from a White House-backed education panel. 5 women sat on stage, each from different walks of political life. The cameras were already rolling, red light beaming, microphones live. The crowd, a mixture of journalists, teachers, lawmakers, and high school students, waited silently. At the center, beneath the subtle hum of overhead lights, was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She adjusted the mic once, then again. No grand entrance, no showboating, just a steady voice, clear and intentional. "We lose over 20,000 teachers a year in rural districts alone," she began. "Not because they don't care, but because we stop giving them reasons to stay." People nodded. Some scribbled notes. Others just listened, eyes wide open, phones recording. No one knew that in less than 5 minutes, this panel, meant to discuss school funding, would become the spark for one of the most explosive political defamation battles in recent memory. And it all started with a sentence that wasn't supposed to be personal, but was. Jasmine Crockett finished her remarks with quiet conviction. No dramatic hand gestures, no partisan jabs. Her voice was measured, her tone respectful. She spoke like someone who'd been in classrooms, not just committee rooms. "If we want to keep the next generation in the classroom," she said, "we have to stop treating teachers like placeholders and start treating them like the backbone of the American future." A few in the audience applauded. Others nodded. There was no tension, no clash, just calm, respectful listening. To any outside observer, this was the kind of moment politics needed more of substance over spectacle. Jasmine leaned back slightly in her chair. She gave a small, polite smile. Her part was done. She didn't know it yet, but the next speaker had already planned something else entirely. Melania Trump rose from her seat with the kind of poise only years in the spotlight could perfect. She walked slowly to the podium. Calm, composed, cold. No teleprompter, no hesitation. She offered a gracious nod to the panel, glanced briefly at the audience, then began. "I want to thank the committee for highlighting the importance of literacy. We owe it to our children to give them the tools to succeed." A few polite claps, nothing unusual yet. But then she shifted slightly. Her eyes flicked just for a second toward Jasmine Crockett. And then she said it. It's interesting to hear from those who have used taxpayer dollars for boutique hotels and designer shoes instead of classrooms. 12 seconds. That's all it took. No one said a word. You could hear the mechanical click of a camera shutter and the squeak of a chair shifting uncomfortably in the back row. She didn't say Jasmine's name, but she didn't have to. Every person in that room felt the temperature drop. Every eye slowly turned toward Jasmine, and every camera stayed locked, zoomed in on the woman who had just been accused without a single word of proof. Melania returned to her notes unbothered, unmoved. As if she hadn't just thrown a grenade into the room and walked away from the blast. There was no moderator intervention, no clarification, just silence. Someone cleared their throat. Another shifted awkwardly in their seat. But every pair of eyes in that room, every one of them landed on Jasmine Crockett. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But her hands tightened slightly in her lap. Her jaw set firmer. Her breath slowed but deeper. She knew. Not because her name had been spoken, but because her character had just been set on fire on national television. And in that moment, all the cameras locked in. Tight close-ups, split screens, reaction shots. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for drama. And Jasmine knew the game. If she flinched, if she fired back, if she gave them 1 second of emotion, they'd loop it for weeks. So she sat still. As the world turned its attention, not to what was said, but to how she would respond. Can a nameless insult still ruin someone's name? It took less than 60 seconds. The clip, 12 seconds long, was already making rounds on X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok before Jasmine even left the stage. Someone had slapped bold white subtitles on it. Another edited it with dramatic sound effects and ominous music. Within an hour, it had over 1.3 million views. By lunchtime, 3 hashtags were trending nationwide: #thief, #boutique scandal, #taxpayer queen. The headlines came next. First Lady calls out Congresswoman's lavish spending. $900 a night, what Jasmine Crockett doesn't want you to see. Corruption couture. Did Jasmine steal from schools? Most of it was fiction. All of it was viral. Talk radio hosts began spinning theories. Political influencers stitched the clip into live streams. YouTubers uploaded breakdown what Melania really meant. No one cared whether it was true. They cared that it felt true. And that was all it took to turn a televised moment into a national scandal. By nightfall, Jasmine's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text, email after email. Some were just noise, but some were threats. You disgust me. Resign, thief. Hope your district burns down. She tried to ignore them. But then came the messages from her office inbox emails with subject lines like, "You don't speak for America. We know what you did. Boutique bitch." Some included attachments, PDFs claiming to be leaked receipts filled with fake travel expenses and doctored numbers. Others, darker, mentions of her family, of her mother in Waco, of her niece's school. And then came the phone calls. Her older sister, Jazz, "Please tell me it's not true. They're saying you stole money from schools." Her mother crying, "Why would she say that about you, baby? What did you ever do to her?" Jasmine didn't have an answer, because even she didn't know the full reason. But the message from Melania was working, not just on the internet, in real life. By the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Not on gossip blogs, not on fringe conspiracy sites, but on mainstream news. Crockett accused of lavish spending while schools struggle. Boutique budget. Did Congresswoman abuse her travel perks? Is Jasmine Crockett the new face of government waste? None of these stories had real evidence, no confirmations, no fact-checking. But they didn't need facts, they had views. News outlets used blurry screenshots of Jasmine stepping out of airports, cropped images of her designer heels, pictures taken at events where she wore tailored suits. Suddenly, her wardrobe became proof. Her success, suspicious. Morning shows debated it. Political analysts called it concerning. And every article ended the same way. Crockett's office declined to comment. What they didn't say, that she was receiving death threats, that her inbox had crashed from spam and hate mail, that her team was scrambling just to keep up. But that didn't matter to them. The story had gone from one comment to a full-blown character assassination. Jasmine Crockett didn't post a video, she didn't tweet, she didn't go live. Not because she didn't have anything to say, but because everything inside her was on fire. She sat in her office, lights off, blinds closed. Her phone screen lit up every few seconds with another notification, another lie, another headline, another stranger claiming to know what she did. She kept scrolling. Her thumb moved, but her body was still like a statue trying not to crack. Across the room, her legislative aide Brianna whispered, "Jazz, you okay?" Jasmine didn't look up. She just said, "They didn't even say my name. And somehow it still feels like I've been stripped naked on live TV." Her voice didn't tremble, but her knuckles were white. She had spent years building her reputation brick by brick, and now with one sentence, the world was tearing it apart without asking her a single question. Because sometimes silence isn't grace. It's the only armor left when the world is throwing knives. So she stayed quiet. But inside a storm was forming. It was almost midnight when Jasmine's phone rang. Unknown number, no caller ID, just a cold vibrating hum in her palm. She hesitated. Half of her wanted to let it ring, but something in her gut said, "Pick up." She answered. "Congresswoman Crockett?" The voice was male, steady, low, no emotion. "You don't know me, but I used to work on the White House communications team." Jasmine froze. She didn't speak, didn't even breathe. "I watched what happened at the panel. I know what she did, and I know it wasn't a mistake." Jasmine's grip on the phone tightened. "Check your email in the next 48 hours, the voice said. "That's all I'm going to say." Click. He hung up. No name, no number, no trace. Just silence followed by a ringing in her ears she couldn't shake. Across the room, Brianna looked up. "Who was that?" Jasmine stared at her screen. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think we just got the first crack in their armor." And with that, the storm outside went quiet. But inside the walls of Jasmine's office, something far more dangerous had begun. The email came exactly 36 hours later. No subject line, no sender name, just one file, uploaded to a secure drop folder used by investigative journalists. Brianna opened it. Her hands shook as she read. "You need to see this," she whispered, sliding the laptop toward Jasmine. Jasmine stared at the screen. It was an internal email, dated 3 days before the education panel. The sender, a junior communications staffer at the White House. The subject, potential panel risks, Crockett presence. The body of the email was short, direct. Recommend avoiding personal comments. Crockett has a clean ethics file. Accusations without proof could backfire. Below it, a reply from a senior aide. Simple, chilling. She'll handle it. Base will eat it up. Jasmine blinked. Once, twice. "They knew," she said quietly. "They were warned, and they did it anyway." Her legal advisor Raymond leaned in, glasses sliding down his nose. "We need to authenticate this. Headers, metadata, everything." Jasmine nodded. "If it's real, this isn't a gaffe, it's a hit job, and it's time we treated it like one." It wasn't a dramatic meeting, no shouting, no pacing. No slamming fists on the table, just 5 people, a laptop, and the kind of silence that means everyone knows what has to be done. Jasmine sat at the head of the table. Raymond Knox, her lead attorney, had the email printouts in front of him, neatly paper-clipped and highlighted. Brianna hadn't touched her coffee. Nobody had. Jasmine tapped her pen once, twice, then finally, "If we let this slide," she said, "we're giving permission for every lie that follows." No one spoke. No one needed to. Raymond cleared his throat. "We've reviewed federal defamation statutes. It's a high bar, but not impossible, especially with this." He slid the folder forward. "This shows calculated intent. It also shows they knew the truth and ignored it. If we don't file for noise, we file to win." Jasmine leaned forward, voice steady. "File it." And just like that, the decision was made. No press release, no Twitter thread. Just a room full of people who understood this wasn't just about one insult. It was about the right to defend your name when the world tries to write it for you. It didn't begin with a press conference. It began with a walk. 8:47 a.m., Federal Courthouse, downtown San Antonio. Jasmine Crockett stepped out of a black SUV wearing a navy blue suit and a stare that didn't blink. No entourage, no makeup artist, just Jasmine, her lawyer Raymond, and Brianna walking up the courthouse steps. Flashes from reporters lit the sidewalk. Someone shouted, "Congresswoman Crockett, is it true you're suing the First Lady?" She didn't stop. She didn't flinch. She pushed the door open and disappeared inside. By 9:02 a.m., the complaint was filed. 48 pages. Sharp, relentless, precise. The lawsuit alleged defamation with reckless disregard for the truth, citing the viral video, internal emails, the timing, the intent, the harm, and one line stood out. This complaint is not about political disagreement. It is about calculated defamation, executed knowingly by one of the most visible public figures in the world. At the bottom, just 2 words: damages sought $100,000 million. Not for fame, not for headlines, but for truth. And for the right to say, you don't get to lie about me and walk away clean. The press didn't wait. Within 30 minutes, the news exploded across national outlets. The headline, Jasmine Crockett sues Melania Trump for $100 million, cites leaked emails and intentional slander. And while the internet spun, Jasmine sat quietly in the back seat of her car. She looked out the window and whispered, "We've got the evidence." Now let's see. Does justice still know what to do with it? For the first 24 hours after the lawsuit hit the press, Melania Trump said nothing. No tweets, no spokesperson statement, not even a reposted prayer quote on Instagram. Just silence. Cable news filled the vacuum with speculation. Was this coordinated? Will Melania have to testify? Could this bring down a First Lady's credibility? Pundits debated on split screens. Legal analysts on podcasts dissected every word of the complaint. Some said it was a bold move. Others called it a long shot. But then, just after the 25th hour, it came. A carefully worded statement, distributed simultaneously to 3 major news outlets. The First Lady denies all allegations contained in Congresswoman Crockett's complaint. At no point were her remarks directed at any specific individual, nor were they intended to cause reputational harm. She called it a misunderstanding, a general comment about government waste, nothing more. Then came the final line. Mrs. Trump has long stood for transparency and accountability in public service, and she will not be distracted by political theatrics. It was cold, clinical, and designed to do exactly one thing: distance herself from the damage without admitting she caused it. It didn't take long for the counterattack to begin. Within hours of Melania's statement, right-wing media outlets picked up the cue. The narrative shifted swiftly, deliberately. This isn't about defamation. This is about silencing a First Lady for speaking uncomfortable truths. Conservative pundits flooded the airwaves. Talk radio, YouTube, podcasts, Fox News. Everywhere the message was the same. Crockett's lawsuit is a political stunt, a way to intimidate and suppress dissent, an abuse of the legal system to punish speech she doesn't like. They called her fragile. They called her dramatic. They accused her of weaponizing victimhood. The most repeated phrase, "so now telling the truth is illegal." They didn't mention the emails. They didn't mention the warnings. They didn't mention intent. Facts weren't part of this campaign. Emotion was. Because once the story becomes about free speech, you no longer need truth to win. You just need outrage. When facts weren't enough, they came for the optics. One conservative blog posted a photo of Jasmine Crockett exiting a department store taken months earlier during a campaign stop. They zoomed in on her shopping bag, then added a headline, "Boutique Queen Spends While Classrooms Crumble." Another site clipped a freeze frame of Jasmine mid-blink during a hearing and plastered it on a thumbnail that read, "This is the face of corruption." Suddenly the way she looked, the way she dressed, even the way she blinked became evidence. Talk shows joked about her wardrobe. Online trolls posted collages of her in suits, heels, handbags. Why does she dress like she's going to Fashion Week on taxpayer money? They made her image louder than her voice. And that's the point. Because when you can't disprove someone's argument, you attack the surface. You strip away context. You turn them into a caricature. Jasmine wasn't just being criticized, she was being reduced. It started with whispers, then tweets, then headlines. Is Jasmine Crockett milking the moment? Playing the victim card? Drama or defamation? Suddenly the question wasn't, did Melania lie? It became, is Jasmine being too sensitive? Cable news anchors asked it with fake neutrality. Do you think Congresswoman Crockett is overreacting? Should public figures be this thin-skinned? The implication was clear. If she had stayed quiet, she'd be graceful. Because she fought back, she must be performing. And just like that, the burden shifted. Jasmine wasn't just defending her name anymore. She was defending her right to defend it. Online trolls framed her as an opportunist. Late-night shows mocked her as the lawsuit lady. Some even called her a distraction from real issues. She was no longer viewed as a woman under attack. She was portrayed as a woman seeking attention. But Jasmine knew something most people don't. The moment you fight back as a woman, especially as a black woman, you stop being seen as wronged. You start being seen as dangerous. It wasn't a leaked photo. It wasn't a headline. It was a PDF. No graphics, no colors, just black text on white background. Stamped, internal use only. A senior staffer from the West Wing had forwarded it anonymously to 3 reporters. Attached was the transcript of a closed-door messaging strategy meeting. And there it was, line 47. Melania Trump. People won't fact-check feelings. They'll just feel them. And if they feel disgusted, they'll remember who made them feel it. The room, according to notes, had laughed. One aide added, "Classic Melania, sharp and cold." It was calculated. It was chilling. Because it wasn't just a remark. It was a philosophy, a media strategy, a confession in plain sight. This wasn't about truth. This wasn't even about winning. It was about weaponizing emotion and trusting that the public wouldn't look deeper. The leak sent shockwaves through political circles, and it left Jasmine's team with one reaction. She said the quiet part out loud. It spread like fire, not just on political blogs, not just on X, formerly Twitter, but on TikTok, Instagram, cable news, late-night shows. People won't fact-check feelings. It was played over slow-motion footage, set to ominous music, juxtaposed with images of working-class families and Melania walking past them in $1,000 heels. Within 12 hours, hashtags erupted. Hashtag #FactCheckFeelings, hashtag Modern Marie Antoinette, hashtag Let Them Feel Hate. Columnists dubbed it the "let them eat cake" of the digital age. Cold, detached, dangerous. One political cartoon showed Melania holding a mirror with the words "emotion, truth" etched in gold across the frame. Editorials asked, is this how the powerful think of us? Are our feelings being used as weapons against us? Even some center-right commentators flinched. One Fox News panelist said, "This doesn't feel strategic, it feels sociopathic." And through it all, Jasmine Crockett stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews, no rebuttals, just silence. But not the weak kind, the kind that waits, that sharpens, that watches a storm form, then chooses exactly when to step into it. It didn't begin with a celebrity. It began with a teacher. A middle school civics instructor from Ohio posted, "Today I told my students, this isn't just politics, this is how power reacts to truth." That post got 17,000 shares in 4 hours. Then came a retired judge from Georgia. "I've seen smear campaigns. This is one. And it's being done with elegance." A group of law students at Howard University published an open letter. Rep. Crockett's silence is not weakness. It's constitutional courage. Then, something unexpected. A Republican-appointed former federal prosecutor wrote in The Atlantic, "When public shaming replaces due process, democracy itself begins to rot." By the end of the week, over 90 public figures had spoken out. Not in viral videos, but in statements, lectures, letters, sermons. Teachers, attorneys, journalists, clergy. Even a conservative think tank researcher simply tweeted, "If you're cheering this, imagine it being done to you." The wave wasn't loud, it was steady, it was thoughtful, it was powerful. And it reminded Jasmine that in the war between volume and value, truth doesn't need to scream. For 12 days, she said nothing. No press conferences, no morning talk shows, no dramatic tweets. She just watched as headlines twisted, as commentators speculated, as strangers on the internet tried to rewrite her life. But then she showed up, not in court, not on cable news, but at a local town hall meeting in her district, in front of 83 folding chairs, no teleprompters, no stage lighting, just her voice, and a microphone that crackled. She didn't raise it, she didn't shout, she just said, "I'm not asking for fame, I'm asking for truth." And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't applause, it wasn't trending hashtags, it was quiet respect. Because the room understood she wasn't playing victim, she was reclaiming reality. But truth doesn't win by itself, not yet. Not when power still controls the microphone, not when influence spins faster than facts. Her words started something, but it wasn't over. There were no cameras, no gavel-slammed montages, no viral clips. Just a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., oak benches, neutral walls, muted tones, and tension. Because even without footage, everyone was watching. CNN ran a live blog. Fox had 5 analysts at the desk. TikTok had artists sketching the scene in real time. Hashtags trended before the first witness even walked in. This wasn't just a trial, it was a cultural autopsy. Every lawyer's step, every turn of Jasmine's head, every glance from Melania's legal team was dissected, interpreted, memed. The courtroom was silent, but America was not. One tweet summed it up. "We can't see it, but somehow this silence feels louder than anything else this year." And as Jasmine walked into the courtroom, shoulders square, jaw set, eyes locked ahead, no one said a word. But everyone felt it. Something bigger than 2 women had just entered that room. The courtroom held its breath. It was the second day of hearings. Still no cameras. Still no raised voices. But something cracked. Because the witness was close. Too close. A former communications advisor to Melania Trump subpoenaed. Reluctant and holding back. Until he wasn't. The courtroom screen lit up. Subject line, Optics Strategy, Jasmine Crockett. Date, 2 days before the education conference. Sender, Office of the First Lady. Recipient, Strategy Messaging Team. We don't need to name her. The base already knows. Let it land emotionally. She'll either overreact or sit silent. Either way, we win. Gasps. Even the judge blinked. But that wasn't all. The advisor, pale, sweating, pulled out handwritten notes from a private planning session. On the yellow notepad, quote, "Something vague. Target boutique waste taxpayer. Let media connect the dots. Do not name her. Safer that way." The courtroom was stunned. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "There was a strategy to frame Rep. Crockett emotionally, as unstable, entitled, wasteful. The words hung in the air, sharp, cold, unmistakable. And for the first time since the trial began, Jasmine looked up. The room was silent, not because of the judge, not because of a gavel, but because Jasmine Crockett stood, alone, no notes, no lawyer beside her, just her hand on the Bible and the weight of a nation watching. She took a breath, not for drama, but because truth takes air. And then she spoke. People keep saying, this is political, that I'm acting, that I'm playing a role. But I don't have that luxury. This isn't performance, it's survival. When someone says something vague and the world assumes it's about you, and suddenly you're being called a thief, a fraud, a disgrace, it's not a moment, it's a storm. A storm you didn't ask for and can't hide from. She paused, then locked eyes with the judge. They didn't name me, but they knew what would happen. And now I'm here, not to reclaim my name, but to prove that silence can't be used as a weapon. No one clapped. No one moved. But a woman in the back row cried silently. And a man next to her whispered, "That's not a politician. That's someone fighting for her right to exist." By the third week, the trial was everywhere. Daytime anchors argued. Late-night hosts joked. Twitter turned into a war zone. Half the country saw Jasmine as a victim of coded cruelty. The other half called her thin-skinned and opportunistic, and the media, they loved it. One headline screamed, "Was it really about Jasmine?" Another countered, "She wasn't named, so why sue?" Podcasts, YouTube reactions, TikTok drama recaps. One clip showed Melania's lawyer calmly stating, "The First Lady simply voiced concern over public spending. That's free speech, full stop." The courtroom murmured. The country debated. But none of them mattered. Because 12 people sat in a box and they didn't get to debate. The judge's instructions were clear. You must ask not just what was said, but why it was said. Was the language vague, or was it targeted with intent? And that was the tension. When does vague become venom? And when does freedom of speech become a shield to harm? The jury leaned forward. America held its breath. 12 hours. That's how long the jury sat behind closed doors, debating, reviewing, questioning everything. Some cried, some yelled. All knew whatever they decided would echo beyond the courtroom. And at 8:03 a.m., the court reconvened. The judge entered. Jasmine stood, Melania too. You could hear a pin drop. The clerk cleared her throat and read, "On the charge of defamation with malicious intent, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiff, Representative Jasmine Crockett. We award damages in the amount of $83 million. The room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for 3 weeks. Jasmine didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She closed her eyes, whispered something to herself, and nodded. Because this wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about revenge. It was about something that can't be measured. When the world tries to erase you with whispers, let your truth roar back with clarity. That day, Jasmine didn't just win a lawsuit. She won back her voice, and America for a moment remembered what justice could sound like. Less than 72 hours after the verdict, Melania's legal team filed for an immediate appeal. Not for the full $83 million, but to challenge the very idea that her words were ever targeted. In a press conference outside a marble-columned courthouse, her spokesperson said, "This case sets a dangerous precedent. If public figures can't speak broadly without fear of litigation, then we've lost the core of American discourse." Melania didn't appear, but she didn't have to. That afternoon, she posted a 3-line statement on Truth Social. "I spoke about policy. The media twisted it into personal. I will not be silenced by distortion." Cable news spun it every which way. Some called it defiant, others delusional. But the divide had returned. And Jasmine? She didn't respond. She didn't need to, because her silence this time wasn't a retreat. It was a closing argument to a nation still deciding which voices it chooses to hear. It was a cloudy Tuesday morning. No press, no crowds, no camera crew waiting by the steps of the Capitol. But at exactly 7:47 a.m., Jasmine Crockett walked up those marble stairs, the same stairs where her name had once been whispered like scandal. This time, no one whispered. A security guard tipped his cap. A staffer held the door. Jasmine didn't speak. She just walked with the same grace, the same fire, but now something more: stillness. Not the stillness of surrender, but of someone who's been to war and come home wiser. Inside her office, on the wall behind her desk, there was no trophy, no framed newspaper clipping, just a quote, handwritten and framed. "Let the truth speak louder than the noise." And beneath it, a photo, not of her in court, not with donors or voters, but a blurry candid from years ago of Jasmine speaking to a room full of students in a low-income school. That was where it all began. And now it began again. The envelope arrived with no return address. It was postmarked from Oklahoma. The handwriting was careful, like someone who still believed in cursive. Inside was a simple piece of lined notebook paper. No headlines, no hashtags. Just a message written in blue ink. "Dear Representative Crockett, I teach 11th grade civics. This semester our students watched parts of your hearing. We debated the law, the ethics, the impact. One student asked if fighting back ever really works. I didn't answer right away, but this morning I showed them the verdict. And then I said, we don't always get to choose the battle, but we do get to choose how we respond. Thank you for choosing strength with grace." There was no signature, but there didn't need to be, because that letter wasn't just for Jasmine. It was for everyone who had ever been targeted in silence and chose to answer not with rage, but with resolve. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in quietly, stands tall, and lets truth do the talking. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not fight louder, but stand firmer. Jasmine's story reminds us that dignity isn't something you beg for, it's something you defend, even when no one claps, even when everyone doubts. Words can harm, whispers can spread. But truth walks slower and wins when it shows up with proof, not pride. You don't always get to pick the battles in life, but you always get to pick your answer. And the right answer, it isn't revenge, it's resilience. If this story moved you, if you believe truth still matters and voices like Jasmine's deserve to be heard, then subscribe to our channel, because this world needs less noise and more stories that whisper truth into the silence. New videos every week. Real stories, real injustice, real courage. Click that button and be part of the change.